Good afternoon, family. Welcome to our first episode of Insured Families Fun Facts. Today's fun fact is going to be on horses and equine. There's many of us out there that have purchased these horses, and it is a passion for us. We go out, we purchase them, we have that asset, and with the prices of horses today, you get a pretty good bit of money tied up in them. So the question arises, how do we offset that? How can we protect ourselves against that loss? Well, with horses, there's really a couple different ways or a couple different policies that we can cover them on. Now, today's segment is not going to be about any specific carrier. We have multiple carriers that we can go to. We'll get into that on personalized basis. Today's going to be generalized just to kind of give you a few facts, as we say, fun facts, to be able to help you in making decisions to cover your horse. So the first option that we can do obviously is a farm and ranch policy. On that farm and ranch, we can cover single horses, we can cover the herd of horses. The second option is going to be equine mortality policies. Now, the equine mortality is going to be specific to that horse. We do have some carriers, though, that we can do uh, herd. So if you want, say you have brood mares and you're staying, you want that herd covered, we can also do that. A little different there, but it is a mortality policy, which is all perils as well. But let me give you a little bit of differences between a farm and ranch policy and an equine mortality policy specific to covering your horses. So on a farm policy, they're going to be listed as either unscheduled or scheduled livestock. You're going to have an agreed value in there. Um, the difference with it versus a mortality policy is the mortality is going to have an agreed value as well. The main differences between them is the farm and ranch is going to be a base perils coverage, or named perils, meaning things like fire, collision, uh, drowned by flood, attacked by wild animal or dog, accidental shooting. Those things are going to be covered in the farm policy. It's not going to cover that sickness, that disease. If it breaks a leg and has to be put down, that's just not going to be covered in a farm policy because it is a named perils only. So in a named perils policy, if that peril is not named within that policy of coverages, there is no coverage. On a mortality policy, that is going to be very similar to you or I having a life policy for ourselves. So it's an all perils policy. It is going to cover the life of that horse on an agreed value. Now, all of our carriers are going to come with 5,000 emergency colic surgery included in your mortality premium. Now, people say, well, how do you get to that premium? So there's different factors that are going to derive there. So one, the horse's age, what the horse's job is, meaning a barrel horse, a rope horse, hunter jumper, cutter reiner, those are all going to have different rates. The breed of the horse is also going to have different rates, whether it be Arabian, whether we're looking at thoroughbred, quarter horses, standardbred, saddlebred. So a pony, all those can be covered, but they're going to be on different rates. We're not going to get into rates today. We do that on a per insured basis. Um, so that kind of will be another segment that we can go into. As far as the 5,000 emergency colic surgery that's included, I wanted to touch bases with that. Keep in mind that is going to be emergency colic surgery. So, in example, if that horse colics goes to the vet and does not have to have surgery, there's not going to be a trigger for that emergency colic surgery to pick up and pay. So that would be out of pocket. Another thing to keep in mind on the EMC or emergency colic surgery is that it's a $5,000 limit with all of our carriers. If that surgery goes over 5,000, then that will be on the insureds to pay. For the most part, what we see, the colic surgeries run anywhere from 8,500 to 13,000. The cheapest one I've seen, I think, was in Arizona, around 6,500. But that horse died on the table. They never opened it up. So The 5,000 is not going to cover. A lot of insurers say, well, how can I offset that? I can't afford a $5,000 surgery bill on top of my insurance premium. There's ways that we can offset that, whether it be by picking up the endorsements. Couple of the entry endorsements are colic and surgical endorsements. Both of those would pick up and pay. Both of those would have a $10,000 limit. So what would happen there if you had those two? If your horse had colic surgery, both of those would come in after the 5,000. So the 5,000 that comes with your mortality would pay out first, and then anything over that would fall under that surgical or that colic endorsement, whichever one you had or both. The differences in the surgical and the colic, they're pretty detailed, but basically the surgical is going to need a surgery to trigger coverage. In other words, if you have a horse goes to vet, does not have surgery, then that surgical endorsement is not going to pay because there's no surgery to trigger the coverage. However, if you have the colic endorsement and that horse has to have or does not have to have surgery but is colic, then your colic's going to pick in and pay there. Now, both of those are going to have a deductible. Most of our carriers are going to be $250 on that deductible, and then it's going to pay 100% up to the limits of the policy after that. We do have a couple carriers that have a little less than that, but that's as a general rule of thumb. There's some coverage or some endorsements you can go into after that, one being medical assistance. Again, I'm not going to get into limits, but they're all going to have a limits because our carriers are different there. Then there's major medical, and all of our carriers are going to have two versions of the major medical. You're going to have a 10,000 limit, and you're going to have a 15,000 limit. Both of those are good policies. Medical assistance is similar to you or I basically having a health policy with, say, a bronze level, or an accident policy and an entry level health policy. Very, very similar. Major medical is going to be more like a true health policy that you or I would have on ourselves. Again, I'm not going to get into the deductibles because the carriers are going to be more specific with that, and we would talk with that in a one-on-one basis or one-on-one case. But you're going to have a deductible. After the deductible, our carriers are going to pay 100% after that. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what mortality is. Again, all perils policy. It's going to come with an emergency colic surgery included in the policy. All of our carriers are going to be 5,000 in regard to that. You can pick up endorsements, whether it be surgical, whether it be colic is our entry level. Then you can go up on that to the medical assistance, major medical, and there's two levels of the major medical. Also for stallions, you've got accident, sickness, and disease endorsement that we can pick up. We can pick up pro foal coverage. We can pick up coverage for the foals. So there's several different options we can go with that. So give us a call if you have any more questions here at Insured Family, 662-263-3154. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.